Good Sunday morning, Northeast Ohio, at this daylight savings sleep adjusted hour. I know about a half dozen Democratic presidential hopefuls about now who wish they had the ability to turn back time. Even still, they likely would not have been able to predict the 180 we saw over the last 8 days, culminating with this week's Super Tuesday surprise. The political comparisons for Joe Biden after Super Tuesday border on hyperbole.
I've never seen a political comeback like this in my life. He is not the comeback kid, he's Lazarus.
Fitting, since 3 weeks ago, after a fifth-place finish in New Hampshire, Biden's political obituary was being written. And while his path to the nomination still isn't a clear path, this is now essentially a two-way race with Bernie Sanders.
It's been much more rapid than anyone expected, that we would see this coalescing around Biden that many of us had written off.
Super Tuesday was supposed to provide Sanders with a delegate boost in the face of the headwind he will now face. Consider this. Of the next 11 states to vote, which includes Ohio, there were only 4 that he was able to carry in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. A dynamic that News 5 political analyst Dr. Tom Sutton says doesn't likely change now that it's basically a head-to-head matchup.
I think going forward, Ohio, Michigan, Florida, Arizona, all coming up in the next 2 weeks, are states that are more than likely going to be going solidly for Biden.
The Baldwin-Wallace Great Lakes poll in January showed Biden leading Sanders in Ohio and Michigan, but Sutton said there was one key finding in the poll, which included Pennsylvania and Wisconsin as well, that stood out. And that was the percentage of Democrats who would vote to support the candidate with the best chance of beating President Trump.
That sentiment, I think, is a part of what we saw in Super Tuesday, where many people may have had a misgiving here or there about Joe Biden, but at the end of the day it became, he may not be my ideal candidate, but I think he's the one that has the best chance of beating President Trump.
But getting back to that map, those 4 states that did vote for Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton in 2016, Michigan, Idaho, North Dakota, and Washington State, they all vote this Tuesday. And if this race has taught us anything, is that a shift in momentum can be big. Well, the upcoming Ohio primary on St. Patrick's Day will mark a homecoming of sorts for Cleveland's own Nina Turner, the co-chair of the Bernie Sanders campaign. Her rise in that organization has her name now being entered into a higher conversation. There are few in the Bernie Sanders camp more visible, more in lockstep with the presidential hopeful than his campaign co-chair, Nina Turner.
He is out there doing the work to make sure that the legacy and the lives of the people that sacrifice so much are brought to bear.
It was something Sanders told me in 2016 that stood out immediately to him.
I'm a big fan of Nina. She has been on board for quite a while, and I think she is speaking truth to power, and not just to the African American community, but to all people. And she is a fighter, and those are the kind of people who we just love to have on board.
Turner is a former Cleveland City Councilwoman and Ohio State Senator who came out initially in 2015 in support of Hillary Clinton. Then one day,
my husband one day said to me, "Baby, you should listen to him. This is you."
She did, and she remained loyal to him, fighting for the progressive planks in the Democratic Party's platform in 2016, and was offered to be Jill Stein's Green Party running mate that year, which she declined. Still, as Sanders battles with Joe Biden for the 2020 Democratic nomination, it is Turner's name popping up as a potential running mate again, this time for Sanders. Several online betting sites like Bovada listing her just behind Georgia's Stacey Abrams as a Sanders selection. Heady stuff, but in the end, News 5 political analyst Dr. Tom Sutton believes not likely to happen.
People who support Bernie Sanders and are involved with the campaign know her as one of the primary people that's involved as one of his campaign leaders. But at the end of the day, I don't think that she's really going to be that viable because of those factors of name recognition, prior experience.
We shall see. Well, one of the key planks of the Bernie Sanders platform is, of course, health care for all. 10 years ago this week, healthcare was very much on the minds of Americans as a Medina woman was thrust into the national spotlight in the debate over Obamacare. This week, a decade later, we catch up with Natoma Canfield.
I'm here because of Natoma.
We first met Natoma Canfield a decade ago when the cancer survivor wrote the president that she had to drop her health insurance because of skyrocketing premiums. And being uninsured, she lived in fear of getting sick and losing her home. The president had no sooner read that letter to insurance company executives when a week later, Natoma collapsed.
Doctors performed a battery of tests, and on Saturday, Natoma was diagnosed with leukemia.
At that point, she became the face of the Affordable Care Act. Looking back a decade later,
but everything happened so fast. If you were going to write this in a novel, no one would ever believe it because there were so many twists and turns.
There was an outpouring of support for her from across the country, she recalled, but there were death threats as well.
one real scary one, and then a few just failed ones.
Ever the optimist, Canfield focuses on the positive, fueled by the reactions she still gets.
I still have parents come up and say, wow, you know, my son, my daughter, you know, they're going to college, but they had a pre-existing condition. We never thought that they could be covered this long.
Natoma was still in the hospital when the Affordable Care Act was signed into law a decade ago, but her sister Connie was there in her place. She would later travel to the White House to see the letter she wrote the president, now framed and hanging in the Oval Office. The two still keep in touch, speaking a few weeks ago.
I had gotten in contact reminding him that it was our 10-year anniversary and I hadn't forgotten. Of course, he said he had not either, and he called to see how I was, and just a caring person.
And he told her that letter that once hung in the Oval Office still hangs today in his private one. And that letter, read 10 years ago this week, will also one day hang in the Obama Presidential Library. With Democracy 2020, I'm John Kosich. Enjoy your Sunday.